Hey guys, it's Miss Vinson. So today we're going to finish up talking about how the government can step in times of market failure by talking about how they can step in and help deal with the issue of income inequality. Now, if you think about our markets, sometimes it can lead to the haves and the have-nots. And so there are different reasons why people make different amounts of money. It could be because of the location of where they've grown up. It could be because of past discrimination. It could be because of your level of education. So there are many different reasons why there's income inequality in our country. And so let's talk about ways we can measure that, and then different ways the government can step in and maybe try to alleviate some of that income inequality. First, let's look at one of the primary graphs that we use to help us understand income inequality in a country. It's called the graph of the Lorenz curve. The Lorenz curve is a curve that shows us the percentage of households that are earning the percentage of income in a country. And so if we were to have perfect income equality in a country, we would have an upward sloping 45-degree line coming out of the origin. Now take a look at the labels on our Lorenz curve axes. On the x-axis, that represents the percent of households in the country. So we have 10%, 20%, 30%, all the way up to 100%. And then on the y-axis, that is the percent of income. So what we're really looking at on this graph is what percentage of a country's households is earning how much of that country's income. The reason why a line with a 45-degree angle is considered income equality is because if you look at the dots that are on the line, we could see that the bottom 10% of households in the country are earning 10% of the income. The bottom 20% of a country are earning 20% of that country's income. If we took it to 50, the bottom 50% of a country's households would be earning 50% of the income. And so what this shows us is that income is distributed equally amongst all of the households. Now, as you can imagine, this is not really how countries are. This is not the Lorenz curve. This is called the line of equality. And we use this line to compare the Lorenz curve to. The closer the Lorenz curve resembles the line of equality, the closer that the Lorenz curve gets to being that 45-degree upward sloping line, the more equal the distribution of income to households in a country. But let's look at a regular Bode Lorenz curve, how we normally would see it. So if you notice on this Lorenz curve, I've got 2 points labeled for reference. Notice that at point A, 50% of the households are earning 30% of the income. What that tells us there, guys, is the bottom 50% of households in this country are only earning 30% of the country's income. While the top half, the top 50%, they're earning the other 70%. So already you can see if half of a country's households is making 30% of the income and the other half of a country's households is making 70% of the income, you can definitely see the income inequality there. At point B, we see that 90% of the households in this country are earning 80% of the income. All right, well, that doesn't sound too bad, does it? Well, think about it this way. The top 10% of households in this country are earning 20% of this country's income. In other words, the top 10% of households in this country are earning a fifth of this entire country's income. Again, that definitely sounds unequal. And so on this graph, guys, the more bowed out the Lorenz curve is, the further away that it kind of pulls from that line of equality, the less and less equal the income distribution is. So if you get, a really Bode and bent Lorenz curve, then that kind of means that the bottom households are hardly earning any income. And then if it shoots up right at the end, that's telling you that like the top 10 or top 20%, they're pretty much earning all of the country's income, while the other 80%, bottom 80%, are scraping by, hardly earning anything. So the more bent that Lorenz curve, the more unequal the income distribution. So you want to be able to interpret a Lorenz curve graph. Now, another way that we can measure income inequality is through something called the Gini coefficient. The Gini coefficient is kind of related to this graph. All we're going to do for the Gini coefficient is we're going to take the distance that's between your Lorenz curve and your line of equality and divide that over the entire bottom triangle of that graph. The distance between your Lorenz curve and your line of equality, let's call that portion section A. And then everything that's under the line of equality, that's going to be section A plus whatever's left over, which is section B. So we basically want to know how much is that inequality over the entire space of the bottom of that graph. Let's use an example with some numbers. If you notice, the area that is under the line of equality is a triangle, right? And we totally know how to do the area of a triangle. So if on our graph we have 100% of the income on the y-axis and 100% of households on the x-axis, we're going to do 100 times 100, which is 10,000, and half of that, which is 5,000. So we'll say that area under the line of equality is 5,000. Well, now we need to figure out what portion of the gap between the Lorenz curve and the line of equality makes up that 5,000 area. So let's say that it makes up 3,000 of it. So that would mean that the curve is kind of pulled away from that line of equality. It's taking up 3,000 of that 5,000 space. Well, if we were to divide that, that would basically be 3/5, which would give us a Gini coefficient of 0.6. Now, the closer the Gini coefficient is to 0, the more equal the distribution of income. The closer the Gini coefficient is to 1, the less equal the distribution of income. Because if it were 0, that would mean that there is no gap between the line of equality and the Lorenz curve. So that would be like, no gap would be 0 over the whole space, which is 5,000. Well, that would be 0. So your Gini coefficient that's 0 means basically that your country is on that line of equality. So the income is being distributed perfectly evenly. If your Gini coefficient is 1, we know that's super inequality, but basically would mean that that whole space is just taken up by the Lorenz curve. So that basically, guys, would translate to the top 1% of households making 100% of the income. So there's basically 1% of households earning all of the money in the country, and the bottom 99%, they're earning nothing. And so that's definitely unequal. Now, how are some ways the government can step in and try to get the income distribution to be a little more equal without, kind of overstepping their boundaries? Well, some of the things they actually do are provide assistance programs to people who meet eligibility requirements, usually based on their income level. So if depending on your income level and maybe how many dependents you have and whatever your situation is, you may be able to receive financial assistance from the government that you don't have to pay back in the form of unemployment benefits if you've been laid off and you're looking for a job and you need some money in the meantime. If you have been disabled, then you might be able to collect disability benefits from the government to help you with your situation of not being able to maybe go back to your job. And some people are eligible to receive welfare payments if they are below the poverty line and usually have dependents. Some people even get food stamps, and some people are even eligible to receive some of the WIC vouchers, which is a nutrition program for women, infants, and children. So the government does provide different assistance programs for people who meet eligibility requirements, who can show that they're in a situation where they really would benefit from these programs. These assistance programs are all referred to as transfer payments because basically we're saying the tax money that people are paying is being transferred and going back to helping people who are struggling in our country. So the tax money is being transferred and turned into assistance for people who are struggling, and that can kind of help with those people that are dealing with some of that income inequality. So the government does step in and offer transfer payments, but sometimes the income inequality can be controlled by the tax system in a country. Now in the United States, we have a progressive tax system. A progressive tax system is when people who earn higher levels of income pay a higher percentage in income taxes. So if you're in one of the top tax brackets, like say you're in the top 20% of income earners in the country, then you're probably going to have to pay a higher tax percentage than somebody who might be earning an income in the bottom 20%. So maybe you're paying 30% for a tax rate on your income, but the people who are in the bottom 20%, maybe they're only paying a 10% tax rate on their income. So with a progressive tax system, the people who earn the least amount are paying less taxes. The people who earn more money are paying more taxes. And this tends to lead to a more even distribution of income. There are other tax systems as well. Some people are against the progressive tax system and says that it unfairly punishes people with higher incomes. Some people would rather see a proportional tax system. A proportional tax system is where no matter what your income level, if you're in the top 20% of income earners or the bottom 20%, everyone pays the same tax rate. So maybe in this case, everyone pays a tax rate of 10% on their income. So if you only earn $20,000, then you pay 10% of $20,000 for taxes. If you earn $200,000, then you have to pay 10% of $200,000. So everybody is paying the same percentage, even though it might not be the same amount. Proportional tax systems would not change the level of income inequality because everybody's paying the same percentage of their income. So nobody's getting taxed any greater percentage than any other group. So proportional tax system would not have an equalizing effect on the income inequality in a country. Finally, there does exist a regressive tax system. A regressive tax system is where actually the people that are making the lower incomes pay a higher percentage in taxes, and the people that are making the higher incomes pay a lower percentage in taxes. And as you can imagine, this just leads to the rich keeping more of their money and getting richer, and the poor having to pay more money and being poorer. So a regressive tax system actually exacerbates the situation of income inequality. Now, the United States currently has a progressive tax system where people who are earning highest amounts are paying a higher tax percentage. People that are earning lower amounts of income are paying a lower tax percentage. And all of that is just the government's way of trying to help with income distribution and keeping the income distribution more equal. Alrighty guys, well, we'll definitely talk a lot more about government policies to help out with things like unemployment and inflation and interest rates when we flip over to macroeconomics. But that's just a little bit about how the government can step in and help out whenever individual markets don't provide all the goods or maybe don't provide the right amount to the right people whenever they're just unregulated. Well, I know you got this, so until next time, see you later.